Hi, this is Chris Fox, author of Right to Market in 5,000 Words Per Hour, and you are listening to Genretainment.
Hi everyone, welcome to Genretainment. If you're new to the show, Genretainment is part of the Sci-Fi Pulse Radio.com network, and we're your hosts, Marks
and Julie, and Genretainment is where we talk about what's happening in the world of film, TV, books, and web series. We give you interviews with writers, directors, producers, and actors in both independent and not-so-independent creations.
Now, I'm a writer, the author of the book Television on the Wild Wild web series creator, filmmaker, and lately also a college professor.
And
you have to call me Professor Marks. Just kidding.
How about Professor X?
Okay.
And I am an actress and also a writer.
And this is episode 123. And the interview this time is with writer Scott Keane. He's the
123, that's a good number.
It is, right? He is the author of the nonfiction books Finish the Script, Story Pitch, Outline Your Novel, and the 5-Day Novel. Yes, he wrote a novel in 5 days.
Wow.
His fiction, doesn't everybody do that?
I don't know, sometimes it takes me 5 days to read a novel.
His fiction includes Ameriguns, Wrath of Dragons, and much, much more.
Well, Scott tells us how he made the transition from college professor to full-time author, shares a number of writing tips, and tells about his fictional books and much more.
We should make a quick mention that if you like our show, please share it with your friends and subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or wherever you're finding us.
Also, the music you heard at the start of the show and that you will hear at the end of the show is from our web series, Reality on Demand. The song is composed by our friend T. Sean Hardy. Now let's get started with the interview.
Well, hi, Scott. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I know you originally from your nonfiction work. When you first came out with that book, the 5-Day Novel, it was quite a challenge.
I mean, everyone doesn't write a novel in 5 days.
I don't know. They should. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that project of yours?
Sure. So probably the year leading up to when I wrote the novel, I was trying to expand my context in the indie scene. So doing a lot of meetups, going to a lot of conferences and so forth. And one of the things I discovered when doing that is that romance authors are possibly some of the hardest working authors out there. The romance readers are just voracious. They read nonstop, they devour books, and to be really successful, it helps if you just crank out books fast. And so I would hear these crazy stories about romance authors with sore hands or literally blood on their keyboards. And I was impressed by this because they would just put out a book like every week, or if not, maybe 2 books a month. And I thought, hey, that is crazy. I won't do that. But what could I do? I was like, could I write a book in 1 day? And I finally decided, like, no, that's impossible for me. I can't write a book 1 day. But I was like, maybe if I tweak my schedule and how I do it, I could possibly write a book in 5 days. And so it was kind of like a challenge for myself of can I work as hard as theoretically a romance author works? And that's what the 5-Day Novel is. It's me planning from start to finish. So it's, the pre-writing, the first draft, the rewrites, the polish of a political thriller.
Yeah, great.
Cool. We've had a lot of writers talk about how much romance writers really write, and they don't always get all their due. Always get their due. I know that I think people now they're pretty much gone, but soap operas, people would kind of look down their noses at soap opera, but they had to put out a lot of pages all the time. Yeah. We've talked to somebody who he worked in soap operas, and he was like, "My God, you wouldn't believe how hard everyone works and how much everyone writes." So
maybe that's the thing. Because of the death of soap operas, romance novels are the replacement for that. So yeah.
Well, those are technically different genres. You're talking like melodrama, telenovela versus like romance with it has to have a happily ever after.
That's true.
Or the period set in romances.
Those generally follows the same happily ever after rules, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true.
Well, they would have a happily ever after if soap operas ever ended. They just continue on.
Maybe. Well, see, I like the happily ever after. Marks teases me about my love of the Hallmark movies.
Yeah,
so
she watches Hallmark movies quite a bit.
He grudgingly says, I've caught him watching some, and he didn't turn away in disgust, I must say.
So let's talk about something else now. No, I'm teasing. Let's talk a little bit about the book that you did write, Ameriguns, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one you wrote in 5 days?
Yeah, it's a political thriller. It's set in DC. I kind of right after, I guess this is the summer of 2016. No, what year is this now? Yeah, 2016. It was right after the Pulse shooting in Florida, and so guns were once again in the news as they seem to be for the past 5-10 years, and there's just a lot of stuff going on in the media, and I kind of wanted to educate myself on the topic. So I started talking to police officers, retired military, and just kind of educating myself on the stuff a normal person doesn't normally know, especially if you aren't that familiar with guns. And Ameriguns is kind of one part thriller, but also kind of my exploration into, the gun situation.
Great. Now, before you did this 5-day novel, what was the fastest you ever wrote a novel before?
I don't know.
Nowhere close to 5 days, I guess.
Well, the novel I wrote immediately before that was the first book in my epic fantasy series, and that took about 6 months to go from the first draft to rewrites to alpha readers to rewrites to editor to rewrites to beta reader to rewrites. So after like the 6 months process of just trying to slog that out, it was kind of exciting to be like, oh, I'm going to crank this out in 1 week. This is stupid, but okay, I'm going to try.
Yeah. If nothing else, it really gets those creative juices flowing in your brain.
It's kind of like for filmmaking, the 48-hour film challenge, that kind of stuff to really get you.
I think every artist has to do something like that.
Yeah, well, 5-day novel is a bit much.
Yeah, maybe not to that extreme, but you have to challenge yourself with quick stuff just to kind of brainstorm. I think sometimes. So
what's your writing? I imagine you're not doing that with every book. So what's kind of your normal schedule now? What do you see as a normal? How many weeks or whatever time period do you normally try to schedule for a book?
I don't. It just kind of whatever the project needs is kind of what I dedicated to it. And now that I pretty much do this full time, I just have my mornings that are set to writing. I go and I write. And then when that book's done, I just, immediately start the next book. So I don't really have a hard schedule. It's just whenever the books are done. Plus, I switch back and forth between the nonfiction to epic fantasy to shorter stuff. So there is not a consistent length anyway.
Yeah.
Now, you've also come out with a couple more nonfiction books after that, Story Pitch, and then your outlining book. So what brought about the Story Pitch idea?
It probably really started with my first book out, which was Finish the Script, and that's a book about screenwriting. And it was basically a summary of my college course on how to write screenplays. And once I got into the indie scene of writing, I was like, you know what, I kind of want to do this for novels, finish the script for books. And that's what the outlining novel was. Except that I like to tie my nonfiction into my fiction books. So, for example, the 5-day novel is tied to Ameriguns. Story Pitch is tied to my dystopian thriller, Resist Them. And outlining your novel is tied to my epic fantasy, Wrath of Dragons. And there was going to be a very long gap between me doing like the first draft of outlining your novel to when it finally came out, because I was writing the epic fantasy book in the middle. And so I was kind of itchy and wanting to do something, and what could I do? And I was like, well, I'm going to do Story Pitch, because there's enough content on the concept of what is a story and how to pitch the story that I could pull just a little bit from 5-day novel, pull a little bit from outline your novel, and then blow that into a full book. And that's what Story Pitch is.
And I like the method. It's kind of log line's a really important tool in script writing, and I think it's a natural kind of growth out of that for novel writers. I find it pretty useful.
Yeah, it is.
And then from Story Pitch, you go into your outlining. For your outlining book, is there anything that you feel that your approach to it stands out compared to other outlining books that people should be aware of?
I think a lot of outlining books are very strict to, it has to be done this way. This is exactly what structure is, and these are the rules you have to follow. I don't subscribe to that. I think that screenplays, yes, they adhere very much to structure. It's what the studios want. It's just how they're done. Novels, structure is important, but it's not structure first. It's very much genre first. It's reader expectation first. And so one of the things that I push forward in my outlining book is like, okay, this is structure. This is how you do it. These are the general rules. Now go ahead and break it to tell the story that you need to tell. And it's okay if you break the structure. The important thing is that you at least have a plan and worry about these other things, the character arcs, worry about the genre and so forth.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned you used to teach. Talk a little bit about that. What did you used to teach in college?
I taught University of Maryland. Basically, the big thing that I was writing classes. So it was screenwriting. It was comics. I can't remember the technical name of that class. It was digital media. It was photography. It was pretty much all the stuff I write books about.
Awesome. It's cool to hear about comic book class.
Yeah, and photography, by the way.
Oh, yeah. One of your jobs is photography with board games, right?
Yeah, so my wife is a chemical engineer, and she made a lot more money than I made as a college professor. And so a job opportunity arrived, and we had the option of moving from Maryland to Texas. And since her job paid way more than what my job paid, we moved to Texas. And once we got there, once you go from like a tenure track plan, it really hurts your career as a college professor to jump down to like adjunct. It's almost impossible to get back to tenure track. So when we were in Texas, I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the writing thing and try to make that a full-time thing. And then on the side, I'm going to go ahead and do photography. But like working with people is hard. They're a pain in the butt. Clients are divas. It's just a hassle. And so my favorite kind of photography is, well, landscapes, but you got to get up really early. But I really like food photography. And I was like, well, what's something related to food, or I can shoot kind of like food. And board games came up. And so I kind of started a photography business where I do commercial photography for board game publishers.
So it's like food porn, but board game porn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they send me the games. I take the photos. They go on Amazon. They print them for banners. They use them for conventions. They use them for sell sheets to sell to other countries and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. That's really cool. I like photography. Although I haven't done photography in years. If this tells you anything, when I enjoyed doing photography, I enjoyed being in the dark room for hours at a time. Nowadays, you just do digital now.
Oh yeah, it's all digital.
I miss the old days though. I miss that. I miss film.
Oh, the smell and the time wait. Oh no, thank you.
And I love being in the dark room for hours. It was just awesome.
When you upload files from your camera to your computer, just turn off the lights and just imagine.
Red light.
Yeah.
It lost its magic.
Do you play a lot of board games? Is that something you ever want to do? Is make a board game?
I think it takes a certain kind of personality to design a board game. I know a lot of designers. I've interviewed a lot of designers on my podcast, and a lot of designers happen to have a background where they are engineers. A lot of board game designers are engineers, and if it's not like actual engineering for like buildings and so forth, it's computer engineering. It takes a kind of, you like to crunch numbers, you like to test layouts and mechanics and all that kind of stuff. So I think maybe I could one day, but a lot of people who do it successfully have a different personality and different background than what I have.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I mean, you have the creative aspect, but everything has to kind of balance out, really. And for a game, you can't have loose ends and.
Oh, and just the tedious stuff. I mean, you design the board game, you play test it, and then you tweak it, and then you play test it like 100 to 1,000 more times with more people, more groups, and that's so tedious. I don't got time for that.
What's one of the prettiest packaging for a board game you've taken pictures of?
There's so many big board games now. One of the games that came out probably past few years that I really enjoyed that was fun to take was one called Blood Rage. I think that's just Eric Lang who designed that, and that's published by Cool Mini or Not. Scythe from Jamie Stegmaier and Stonemaier Games. That is another fantastically beautiful game that has a lot of good gameplay with it.
Cool. Have you been to Gen Con in Indianapolis then?
I've not done Gen Con. It's huge. I've done Origins. I've done BGG Con. I've done a bunch of smaller cons also.
Okay.
Awesome. And you also have a podcast, right?
Yep, the Creators Cast.
Mm-hmm. What episode are you on currently? Like, how many episodes do you have?
I think I just recorded like 135, but I took a 6 months break this year because we moved from Texas to Pennsylvania, which was crazy. Plus, while we were still in Texas, Hurricane Harvey hit, and so we were kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. Mm-hmm. So we were luckily okay. Our house was safe and dry, but a lot of people we knew weren't. So I was out helping people mud out their houses and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's rough.
All right, so your fiction books. What's your fantasy series about, or fantasy book? Is that first book out yet?
Yeah, the first book came out. It came out on March 3rd, which was my birthday. I was like, hey, a gift to myself is people can finally read this book.
You were ready to kick it out of the nest, weren't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's kind of like classic epic fantasy. It's second world because of the way I write dialogue. It's much more contemporary dialogue. It's not thee or thou or that kind of stuff. The plot is, you got a young mage who kind of wants to be a hero. There's a princess who's trying to save her kingdom. There's a runaway dragon. There's dragon armies. It's lots of action, lots of jokes, lots of humor. It's just a kind of a fun adventure.
Is this going to be a trilogy or just ongoing series?
Right now, I believe it's going to be 9 books in the main series. And then I kind of, between each of the main books, I'm going to release a collection of short stories set in the world. Sometimes flashbacks, sometimes flash sideways, sometimes flash forwards. And there's going to be 9 of those books also.
Cool.
Nice.
Very cool. So, is there any other fiction work you have currently out that you'd like that you haven't already mentioned, like Ameriguns and Resist Them? Is it Resist Them?
Yeah, Resist. Yeah.
Yeah, Resist Them. Yeah,
Can you tell us a
dystopian
little bit
thriller.
about that one? Yeah.
Basically, I was working on the sequel to Ameriguns, and then the election of 2016 happened. And the plot I had actually planned out for Ameriguns Book 2 just didn't work anymore with Republicans now controlling Congress and the White House. And so I was like, well, crap, I'll just kind of sit on this story. And what I want to do now, and my response kind of to that whole election situation was Resist Them. And it's a dystopian thriller set in a future where the government literally pumps their information directly into your brain, and you can't turn it off or do anything about it.
You have just described my hell. I've already just dropped off of the social media world for a couple years now and want nothing to do with that. So having it pumped into my brain and can't escape, that's hell.
That's why it's a dystopian thriller.
Yes. That is just several steps beyond dystopia.
It's not utopian.
No. One more election and I'm going to just become Amish is all I can say.
Is there any other fiction work you like to mention that you've done?
There's my middle grade books. If you like middle grade, I have a series. It's kind of like the early Harry Potters or the Percy Jackson. It's 2 kids. There's genies, there's djinns, there's unicorns fighting. There's a war between cupcakes and brownies. It's fun and crazy.
Oh man, how can you choose between cupcakes and brownies?
Well, that's why they're at war.
Oh, there has to be peace. I mean, what if you run out of cupcakes and brownies because they're busy killing themselves? Man, you're killing me today, Scott.
Yep. And so they all died, and that's what led to the dystopian world.
Well, yeah, if there are no cupcakes or brownies to eat, then yeah, you are well on your way to a dystopian world.
Well, technically, all my books actually take place in the same universe and are connected.
Oh,
so, I mean, that's not how they get to the dystopian world, but I'm just saying it's not far off.
Yeah. See, he's with me on this. If you cannot drown your sorrows in those things, then life is just not worth it.
That's cool that technically you're in the same world. So I'll always
I had to figure out how those things all connect. We'll have to read all the books real carefully and start taking notes.
Well, then there's my comic book, Holiday Wars, and that's kind of like the central one that a lot of them connect through.
Oh,
okay.
Tell us about that one.
The premise is basically holidays are sentient. They are living personified beings, and they kind of adjust to our culture. So as Easter has changed from how it was 200 years ago, kind of like a pagan spring goddess, Easter is now literally a bunny. And tired and frustrated with this change and not being able to control who they are, they kind of declare war on all the holidays. Easter kills Santa, and that's how you have the holiday wars.
Oh, no.
That sounds interesting. You said that was a comic book?
Yeah, the first one was published through a traditional publisher, and the rest are just online for right now.
Oh,
and I'll eventually collect those all. I think we're up to book 4. Yeah, because I have to write book 5. So we're up to book 4 now.
I totally missed that. Didn't know you had a comic book out.
Yeah.
You covered a lot really fast.
Scott's very good at getting all that information in there. You can tell he was a professor.
So for people who listen, because a lot of people who listen are creators themselves in one format or another, is there any writing tip you'd like to share with them?
Writing tip I'd like to share. I would think that the only tip I have regarding writing is that if you want to be a writer, you have to write. That the world we live in is very busy. You got to pay your bills. If you got kids, you kind of have to make sure your kids are safe and you take care of them. Then if you have a spouse, there's the romantic relationship.
You gotta feed those kids every day or they get grumpy.
Romantic relations take time.
Yeah.
There's things like media that you want to consume. You want to read a book, you want to watch TV, you want to watch a movie, you want to play a game. There's a lot going on. And if writing is truly important to you, if it's something you want to do, you have to prioritize it. You have to figure out somehow in your life to fit it in. And if you don't fit it in, it's just never going to happen. So that's my biggest tip, is that if you want to write, go and actually write.
Yeah.
Great. Now, you taught script writing before, and I was wondering, like, I've went to film school and such, so and I've written scripts, and I'm trying to write fiction novels, and I have a little bit of, it's just a different shift in thinking in a way of tell a story. Did you have any problems at all shifting that thinking, or do you have any tips for someone trying to shift from script writing to novel writing?
I would say that the biggest thing from going one to the other is obviously the format. There is no real format when talking about novels, and you aren't just stuck with structure. You can kind of have the novel go off to the side and meander a little bit, and that's fine, especially if you're writing a series. There's much more freedom, so embrace that freedom. I know personally, what I struggled with most was going from the description lines in a screenplay to the narrative prose in a novel, because a screenplay is very like as trim as possible. There's a room, the room is blah, 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 blah. And it's just like boom, boom, boom. And the descriptions are just kind of what they are. And then you get to the meat of the scene, and that's always dialogue. Or if there's action, there's some action. Whereas a novel is very much more like you need to be in the character's head. So it's not just there is a room. It's okay, there's a room, but your character with their personality and the voice they have, what do they actually notice in the room? And what information about that room is what the reader actually needs to know. So maybe the room, if we're talking fantasy, the room is set in a king's bedroom. Well, what I need to describe in this king's bedroom to make it super fancy. I was like, well, I can go through and describe a mirror, and the mirror has all these things. And then, the bed has gold, blah, 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 blah. And eventually you're going to get to a point where you're going to be kind of doing a laundry list of descriptions, and the reader's not going to be paying attention anymore. So you really just need to buckle down. Okay, what is my character going to, notice? And of the things that they might notice, what information there might provide everything you need to see in the room to the reader. So if I describe only the mirror and make sure the mirror is like just over the top, ridiculously fancy, then maybe that's enough for the reader to imagine on their own that the rest of the room is fancy too. So it's just almost like a weird different mindset of literally kind of manipulating the reader into seeing things even if you aren't describing them.
Yeah. Well, and the way you described it struck me that one way to describe to someone who's used to writing scripts is that you, as the writer for a novel, you have to do everything that for a script, the writer, the actor, and the director would all kind of, and the set coordinator and the art direction would all collectively do,
Yeah.
Because in that you would, in a script, you wouldn't get too detailed unless there was a particular detail that was very important to the story, because these other people have to do their part. That's someone else's job, create the set and the props, and it's the actor's job to decide how the character would interact in that room. It's the director's job to get it all together. So yeah, writing, if you're used to writing scripts and you go to write prose, it's like you just have to go, okay, I have to do what all those people would do, in that as well. But it does give you more freedom, which is, and more control over it, which is really nice.
Do you prefer first person or third person, or does it matter?
Or does the story tell you?
To you?
Oh, I despise first person. Like, I don't even read books that are first person.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
And I think
one of our cats was so surprised, she just went, "Roo!"
I think that's probably my film background, and from writing screenplays, is that the idea of writing in first person or even reading it just drives me crazy. And so my cheat is obviously if there's an important book, just a hot book that I want to read. A lot of times I'll just get the audiobook, and that's fine. I can listen to the audiobook first person, but it just feels really weird reading for me personally in first person. And that's not like there's something wrong with first person. That is just me being strange.
That's just a personal hang up.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, we all have our own little personal things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well,
if that's your worst pet peeve, I think you're adjusting well to life.
Do you have any other nonfiction books in the works or planned?
I have at least one more coming out. That's with the editor. I'm not ready to announce it, but it should be out by the fall at the latest.
Oh,
okay.
awesome.
Keep us
Watch
updated
for
on
it.
that, please.
Yeah.
Great. And of course, you got your fantasy series going. And is there any other fictional work you're working on? Like any other new series you're thinking about doing?
Oh no. It's pretty much at this point trying to do the fantasy book, so the fantasy series, and right now, I'm probably like 4 books in of 18, so that's a big priority,
Oh, wow.
and just making sure that I'm still keeping up my nonfiction along the way.
Yeah.
I'm sure at some point I'm gonna go back and redo Ameriguns book 2 and flesh out that series more, but that might just be like, oh, I've been writing fantasy books for 14 months now. I just
need a
need
break.
2 weeks off, and I'm gonna crash and do a trilogy or something stupid.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, before you go, can you remind everybody where they can find you online and your work?
Sure, my website is www.scottking.info, and then I am on Twitter as @ScottKing, and you can find all my books on Amazon. Just type in Scott King, Five the Novel, or whatever, and then a lot of them are also on Audible too.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Scott.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, it's Sean Coyne from the Story Grid, published by Black Irish Books, and you're listening to Genre-tainment.
Well, a big thank you to Scott for taking the time to chat with us. And please be sure to check out any of his books that sound interesting to you. We'll have any links mentioned in the show notes.
So that's it for today's episode. Before we go, we want to remind you that you can always keep track of us by subscribing to us on iTunes or by following our Genre-tainment Facebook page, my Twitter account, which is @MrMarks, genretainment.com, or follow all the shows at sci-fi-pulse-radio.com.
We'll be back soon with all new guests from our favorite film, TV shows, novels, and web series. Genre-tainment is a production of Alien Jungle Bug Productions. Until next time. Well, thanks to Scott for taking... On my planet, that's perfectly understandable. Okay. Bad monkey.